Hi guys, I'm Mitchell Furman. I'm a reporter with the Monitor. We're doing a conversation today. We'll be with the McAllen Commission District 2 candidates. We'll put them at District 2 is the northwestern part of McAllen. This is Joaquin J.J. Zamora.
Hi, good afternoon.
He is a candidate for District 2. Commissioner Trey Pebley is the incumbent. The election is May 6th. Joaquin, J.J., do you care?
It goes both ways. Most of my childhood friends and family have known me for JJ.
Okay.
When I went away to school at the University of Texas at Austin and Texas Tech, School of Law, they got to know me as Joaquin.
Okay.
But McAllen's always been my hometown, so I'm going back with my hometown name. So
Okay.
JJ is good.
Yeah, so you're from here. You mentioned you're with you're an assistant district attorney with the county.
Yes.
Pushing 20 years, right?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, May 4th of next month, I will have completed 19 years
Wow.
with the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office.
Okay. So you've been here your whole life. Why? You've said the city's in a good place. So why do you want to do this?
Well, growing up, I've always had an interest in city government. I'm very proud of our city. I think our city, over the course of, I guess, my 45 years, has done well. McAllen is a city that, in my opinion, is second to none in the region, and hopefully strive to be the second to none in the state. Like I said, McAllen has been a good city, well-rounded, a lot of good leaders, and since I was a kid, I've always had a desire to also run and invest my time with the city to make it the very best city that myself, my family, or family and friends could ever live in. So it's something that I'm realizing now, and as I campaign, I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. What do you want to do? Why do you think you can be better than?
What I've been finding out, and it's been validated as I've been block walking, and there's approximately 40 neighborhoods in District 2. And yesterday, my wife and I and some close family friends have now completed 22 neighborhoods in the last 3 weeks. Aside from the traffic congestion, the mobility issues that are going on with our district, there really is a sense in speaking to our neighbors in District 2 that they're disconnected from City Hall. Whether it be the issue on Prop 1, voting against it, and other people going for it in City Hall, whether it be issues that has to do with the hospital district, spending with the parade. There's a various differences of opinion. There's been some neighbors who lived across the street from a proposed housing complex some years back, where there was a discord where the homeowners didn't want the rezoning to occur to allow the housing units to come in, yet the commissioner at the time voted for it when it was clear, or at least made clear to some of the residents in that particular neighborhood, that they were against having that type of development so close by. So to me, there's a disconnect, and I want to be that voice. I want to be that advocate in City Hall to reconnect, to be that liaison between the neighbors of District 2 and City Hall, and for that matter, all the citizens of McAllen. It's something that I believe and I want to invest my time in to be the next city commissioner for District 2.
So you're saying Commissioner Pebley there's a disconnect between the district and Commissioner Pebley. That's kind of what you're getting at.
That's correct. With some of our community leaders, whether it be through church or whether it be professional organizations or even my colleagues, they've represented to me that seems to be the case. Mr. Pebley is a good commissioner. He's a good family man. I've had the opportunity to speak to him last fall in October. I have only but good things to say. I think what this does come down to is style, maybe some character, personality. Certainly one that's willing to go out into the neighborhood and speak to the neighbors there. What I find discouraging, been finding discouraging in the last 3 weeks, a lot of our neighbors in District 2 do not know our current city commissioner. Without me even prompting or asking, they themselves ask, well, who's in there right now? And I mentioned my opponent's name, and inevitably the response, or the typical response, is, well, I don't know him, or I don't know who he is. I do explain also a little bit about what a city commissioner does. In one sense, it's kind of a representative for that district, review ordinances, look at rezoning requests, conditional use permits, certainly spend time with budgets. And so we have dialogue with the neighbors, and they seem to understand. I've been a part of District 2 when there was a District 2 my whole life. My family, through my maternal grandparents, have been living off 23rd and Mona Avenue since the 50s and eventually developed into a residential subdivision in the late 60s, early 70s. So a lot of the people in that area have gone to know me through our family business. Either someone is driving grocery and now someone is restaurant.
Right.
So certainly the name of Samora is helping out in terms of the name recognition.
Right. So in the fall, Commissioner Pebley had a town hall at Lark Community Center.
Yes, I remember. I attended.
Yeah, and it's, there were kind of a few things that stood out that there weren't a lot of people, but the questions were all about, are they safe? Are their neighborhoods and the alleys behind their homes clean? And are the streets in their neighborhood and around their neighborhood taken care of? How would you assess those things in District 2?
Well, fortunately, I've actually gone through some of those neighborhoods. One in particular that brought to mind was Lark Landing, where the question was asked if they could install surveillance video cameras. They have been installed, so that was a plus. There's some neighborhoods who complain about brush being laid in the streets. Of course, that becomes unsightly, especially this time of year when there's a lot of pruning. I have received complaints in certain part, off Xenops Avenue, specifically where it seems like there must be some sort of feud between some of the neighbors or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the city commissioner could do to resolve that, but certainly a solution would to have more routine brush pickups. I know that our brush schedule is, at least for District 2, is generally speaking the first of the month.
Yeah.
Maybe having 2 trips would resolve some of that issue. But I also must bring to light, in fact, there are some neighborhoods who are not as upper middle class or middle class in our district where they have dead-end streets. And in our walking and through my family and my wife and my daughter, we find there's a lot of litter, there's a lot of tires. There are barricades that apparently have been removed, specifically in Plantation Gap South off North Benson Road and 4 Mile, that appears that the Public Works Department is going and making an alley for themselves so they don't have to make a U-turn. Unfortunately, maybe either by lack of design or lack of vision, those are some of the issues that maybe that should have been a cul-de-sac, or at least create a temporary alley to allow egress and egress, through the neighborhood for Public Works. But certainly, there's a lot of lack of education. Our citizens in McAllen, citizens in general in cities, have tremendous power. And so as I go through the neighborhoods, I want to leave with the impression that citizens can be empowered and should use that power. I mean, they are the reason why we have an office. They are the reason why we work. I've been a public servant for over 19 years, well, come this May. And I truly believe that when it's a public servant, you're doing service to the public and not to oneself. And so some of the issues that were brought up in that town hall meeting, some have been resolved or addressed. I know that there was one neighborhood, Loxley neighborhood, Nightingale is the street, where there was an issue about that it hadn't been repaved in as many years. I don't recall it was 10 or 12 years. I just finished walking that neighborhood this past weekend, and as far as I'm concerned, I looked at Nightingale, it does not look repaved. I can tell you that Tierra del Sol, which is the subdivision immediately south of Mona Avenue, is being repaved. That's great. I mean, there's about easily 200 or 300 rooftops in that neighborhood, and it's good to see that those projects are in fact being done.
Right. Kind of along those lines, so the capital improvement budgeting, which capital improvement is kind of hard to define,
right.
But it's complicated at least. But basically it involves money for streets, sidewalks, those kind of things. Right. And the budgeting for capital improvements has significantly decreased in the last few years, or more than a few years. But for example, 2014, the city spent $7.3 million for capital improvements. 2015, $5.1 million. And then 2.7 this past year, and it's budgeted for less this year. Do you see a problem with decreasing capital improvement budgeting, or is that okay, or can that money be made up for in other ways?
Well, certainly we want to keep up our public infrastructure. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. Good streets, drainage, sewer, police, fire. I mean, I think those are and water and sewer. Those are the basic needs of any city. But the thing about that, those are the foundations of our city, and if we can't address those things to begin with, I don't think as a city we can truly grow. We have to re-emphasize and re-look at some of our streets. Fortunately, most of the city streets that I walk through or drive through in District 2 are pretty well kept. There are streets that appear to be in more greater need. They've deteriorated to a certain point. Like Loxley, where you can kind of see where the gravel is chipping off,
right.
Nightingale. I do see obviously a need for more budgeting. You know, our city's still growing. As we grow north towards the threat levels development, there's going to be more stress on our streets. There's going to be more stress on our water, more stress on our sewer, our drainage system. We have to rebuild and reinvest in what makes truly a city, whether it be through maybe marketing to increase sales tax revenue. I understand there's a statistic that if you put all the property valuation taxes that are collected on a yearly basis, that alone will only cover 49% of our budget. And that 49% of our city budget is dedicated to public safety. So obviously our city depends heavily on sales tax revenue, hotel tax revenue, other sources of income that will bring money to the city. I'm not going to ignore that. I mean, sales tax is very important to our city. But certainly there has to be other opportunities that we can avail ourselves to look at other resources for funding. You know, I'm going to be very, very forward with you, Mitchell. I don't have all the answers, you know, but as an attorney, you know, I've been taught to look at an issue, to analyze it, be creative in the problem-solving process, use collaboration, talk to the people who are in need, talk to the people who have these concerns and issues. They're stakeholders. Bring them to the table. Resolve these issues together. You know, let's be creative. Let's just not be single-minded and this is my agenda and this is what's going to be done. I really believe and truly believe that all citizens have a voice, all have a stake in our in the future of our city. And you know, one of the first steps that I intend to do as your next city commissioner in District 2 is to be sure we reach out to those neighborhoods who felt like they haven't been advocated for the neighborhoods who haven't seen a city commissioner or another candidate for anything in 10 years. You know, it's about reconnecting there. And certainly, you know, I'd like to see that capital improvement budget increase. Of course, the strains of funding, you know, from either sales tax or property valuation is something to consider. But like I say, we have a lot of talent in our community, a lot of professionals that can, you know, help us think outside the box so we can arrive at those solutions.
You mentioned reaching out. That would be the first thing
Yes.
you do. So you've basically been doing that, right? The past
Yes.
like month or
Approximately,
two.
yes.
And so what kind of things have you come to? You know, you've already been reaching out, right?
What I've come to realize is that our citizens are not as involved as they can possibly be. Many are occupied with their own jobs, their careers, with their families, and naturally so.
Right.
I want to be the type of proactive city commissioner that goes into the neighborhoods and extend the hand out. One of the things and goals that I'd like to do is to identify neighborhood leaders within their own community. Leaders who can be their voice to reach me out, or personally they can reach out to me on their own. But the important thing is to kind of create a sense of community. Sometimes there's a disconnect even within neighbors, you know, whether it be on Ware Heights where there's problems trying to exit through one street in the morning and the evening, trying to identify those issues so that they don't just lag on and go on for years and years. And after a while, you know, I think some people feel apathy. You know, they feel like, well, you can't beat City Hall.
Right.
And it comes true. I mean, you know, their vision of what will happen comes true because they don't participate. And I encourage all voters, and I've come across some voters that, you know, or citizens who live in the district that I can sense that, you know, they made up their mind on who they want to vote. And I'm not trying to convince them, but I just want to explain, hopefully by me being present, that somebody does care. I'm doing that undertaking now. And I want to be sure that citizens of District 2 and the entire city, for that matter, have that connection, and I hope to be that person.
Right. You mentioned safety. The city's earned plenty of recognition as being a safe city. You know, the city touts a lot of awards they won for that, and I mean, by and large, it probably is, right? Like you feel safe,
Yes.
right? I mean,
as a prosecutor, I can tell you that
Yeah.
just by a cursory review of the cases I receive, I think just the worst cases I've received from McAllen are evading arrest with a vehicle. Usually there's a DWI involved with that. Interestingly, though, most of those come from the downtown district.
Yeah.
It seems like most of the case files that I receive and reviewed and prosecuted come from the downtown district. Occasionally, you'll have a child abuse case, you know, from a residential neighborhood, or other cases, you know, throughout the city. Those almost, I don't want to say they're random acts,
Right.
but obviously, I don't think any victim wants to be a victim of crime
Right.
or chooses to be a victim of crime. It's always the defendant or the criminal who gets to elect the time and place of the crime to
Right.
be committed. But generally speaking, I've been fortunate to live in an area that's been very safe. I've left my lawnmower in the backyard with the sliding gate open, and it's still there 2 or 3 days later.
Right.
And even in my old neighborhood, Mono Avenue, which has its own reputation for not being such the stellar neighborhood, but there in that neighborhood, there's still a sense of community, of respect, towards one another. That neighborhood is over 60 years old, and I feel safe in that neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe for someone who lives in a different part of town who isn't familiar with the area, naturally would seem that it doesn't appear to be safe. But these are good citizens who take pride in their homes with the incomes or the resources they have, and they're willing to call the police or 911,
Right.
or whatever it needs to make sure our community is safe.
And so while the city is, safe for the most part, violent crimes went up last year. So there was 1 more murder, there were 24 more rapes, 14 more robberies, 24 more aggravated assaults. How do you fix that?
Well, like I said before, I don't know how you can't fix that. I think these are issues and concerns that come with a growing city. When I was born, McAllen had a little bit over 37,000 people. As we speak today, our census is a little bit over 142,000 inhabitants. Again, it's crime is part of any growing community, unfortunately. My desire is always to be, as a prosecutor, is to basically prosecute my way out of a job, where we wouldn't have any crime. But we understand that there is a criminal element, whether it be for money, for drugs, jealousy, assaults are committed. These things, you can throw as much prevention, education, don't have your 9-year-old daughter on Facebook. Make sure that if you're in a violent relationship, go to Mujeres Unidas, go get a protective order. These are all resources in our community that are readily available. But sometimes you have to empower those victims, especially when it comes to assault crimes and there's domestic abuse, to say, hey, we're from the government and we're here to help.
Right.
I know it sounds kind of quirky that way, but we really are here to help and getting citizens who need that type of protection, especially when it involves family violence, to know that they're there. But it's very difficult, in those 19 years that I've seen that it's difficult for victims of those type of offenses to separate from the relationship, and sometimes you end up 2 or 3 assaults in the same month or 2 or 3 assaults in the same year, and that's quite unfortunate. And sometimes when there's families, there are children involved, whether they're the victims themselves, and even if they're witnesses to the crime, I still say that they're still being abused because they're witnessing mother and father, unfortunately, engaging where typically it's been the female who's been on the receiving end.
Yeah. So half the city budget, it goes towards police and fire,
Right.
and they they basically report to the commission, more or less. Would you kind of push for more jobs in those places, or are they okay, or
I will go out to say that there is certainly a need to retain the talent that we have in our fire department and the police department. And to keep that talent, you have to pay for that talent. They take a high-risk job. Of course, nobody's forced them to do this.
right?
But I doubt that yourself or I or any of these fine folks here in the Monitor would elect to do something like that. You never know what's going to happen at a traffic stop, or what may have been a normal domestic disturbance call would happen some weeks back,
Right.
involving that softball player, escalated where we had 3 deaths involved. You see, certainly I think 49% just shows how strong our city is committed to keeping our community and our citizens safe. Certainly, if there's a need that if there's more crime or the rates for violent crimes increases, maybe enlarging more patrols or creating more neighborhoods that have safety patrols, or neighborhoods that are Crime Stopper neighborhoods. I think those are other ways that we can engage in with our local community without having to increase the budget. But I still go back. Sometimes we have to pay to keep well-trained, well-educated, and certainly well-prepared police officers and fire department. And if we want to retain the kind of community that we have right now and improve it, we have to invest in them as well.
All right. Moving on, so the city has no full-time government affairs person in Austin or Washington or Mexico City even. A lot of cities tend to hire lobbyist firms or contract basis, especially during legislatures and stuff like that.
That's right.
Do you think it's necessary? I mean, the city's it's the leader in the valley, right? Supposedly, do you think it's necessary for the city of McAllen to have a full-time kind of government affairs person in Austin or Washington or Mexico?
On that issue, I'm not sufficiently educated enough to give you an answer.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm a risk taker, so I'll stab at it.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate. I advocate for people who are victims of crime. Certainly, I can't be in all places to advocate, other than the cases that I'm in charge of. By analogy, the city of McAllen doesn't have the kind of maybe time or budget to hire its own personnel. They're in Austin during the legislative season, or in U.S. Congress, during when they're in session. I think that itself is an investment, to making sure that McAllen has a face. Just the way I want to be sure that District 2 has a face on the City Commission Board, that McAllen always has a face in Austin, has a face in Washington, D.C., certainly has a face in Mexico City. And I'll just go on a quick aside, as much time and money and effort that McAllen has invested in Monterrey, I do believe that it is time to invest more money in Mexico City. I think Mexico City is the future in terms of tourism. Mexico City, I can say from a personal fact, is a very, very safe city. I myself, in the last 3 years, I've traveled there at least 8 or 10 times, 3 times a year. I travel with my wife, I travel with my daughter. Of course, everybody's experience is very different.
Right.
Getting around the city is quite easy. There's a lot of business, a lot of money, a lot of wealthy and higher income neighborhoods. Given the time, the way the peso devaluation is affecting locally, it may not be such a bad idea that our city start, reaching out to people, say, hey, buy your second home here, vacation in McAllen, do the shopping, rent out the house. You want to come here for Holy Week, the island's only an hour away. Kind of to be a secondary home, for those type of citizens in Mexico City. And we're fortunate that we even have an airline, Aeromar, that has at least once a day flights. And I think we ought to improve on that connection.
Right. Okay. So you would be open or even be an advocate for having some, full time. The Chamber of Commerce already has a full time staffer in Monterrey.
Yes.
Would you more full-time positions maybe in Mexico?
If I was independently wealthy, I would do it myself.
Yeah.
But yes, I think maybe not a full-time position, but maybe something that's maybe part-time.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're being out there. The city's already invested in having the airline. Aeromar has already invested in McAllen for the last 3 consecutive years. They haven't left. They've been very faithful to our city, and I'm very happy and appreciative of their commitment to our city. I think it is time that we do kind of kick it up a notch and start reaching a slightly larger market. And I say largely market because Monterrey, metropolitan-wise, has about maybe 4, maybe 5 million people. Mexico City, you're talking 22 to 24 million people in an area the size of Houston. So there's a lot of people that live there.
For example, FAR has a liaison with the, specifically regarding the bridge, but he's basically just running around Mexico every day, meeting with people. He used to work in the Tamaulipas government, and he, it helps big to the, their bridge is big time. Right. So do they, and Mission's also very active in Austin, has a strong presence. I mean, do those kind of thing, with people talk about these other cities kind of growing, and McAllen maybe not as much, whether that's true or not, but do you kind of see those positions as being of interest to you? Not to you, but to implementing with the city.
Yes. Obviously, like I said, I think it's important that our city have a voice. To kind of expand a little bit more on the question and my answer to your question, rather, I think we have to seriously look at maybe regionalization. I think we do better when we put our legislators, our senators, our representatives together to work to a project. To try to bring, like what happened with the UT Medical School here at UT-RGV and in Brownsville. I think good things can only happen when we collaborate and we work together. I don't think it necessarily would result or means having to give up our identity as a city. But certainly, if we have a highway that runs through, Interstate 2 only runs maybe 3.5, 4 miles through the city of McAllen. Interstate 69C runs almost 8 or 10 miles in Edinburgh. We have to understand that the logistics, that's just what we're dealt with. I think there is a time in the very near future that we start collaborating with the cities and making sure that that Austin and Washington, D.C. and Mexico City aren't hearing 5, 10, 12, 20 different voices.
Right.
I think there's always strength in numbers.
Yeah.
A house divided can't stand. I think we're not so big. We're not we don't have the population of Dallas or Houston to really be considered a core city. The cities of Florida, Edinburgh, and Mission are pretty much all hitting or nearing the 100,000 population mark.
Right.
So I think it's more important in Incumbent and McAllen that if we want to maintain this edge, we may have to look at these other cities and maybe explore opportunities on projects that affect the entire region, not just necessarily
Right.
McAllen.
You mentioned the medical school.
Yeah.
Austin, there's a lot of conversation in Austin about the funding for the medical school, which is, in a pretty crucial moment. It's just starting out. I think Dan Patrick said that, it's what, the early stages is when it, it goes one way or the other.
Right.
Local communities have pledged commitments to pay the medical school. McAllen agreed to pay up to $2 million a year.
Yes.
And they've paid once. They paid in 2014. They paid the full $2 million, but they haven't paid since. Where do you stand on that?
Well, on this particular question, since I'm not on the commission, I'm not privy to a lot of the conversations that I have. The very, very little that I know, that there's a memo of understanding.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of hard to prove out contractually that there's some sort of legal obligations involved.
Right.
Obviously, the spirit and the intent of the memo is there. I certainly think that as a city, if we pledge or do something to the fact that we own up to our promises. But I'm not going to stand here, or sit here rather, and try to, armchair quarterback somebody else's decision.
Yeah.
I think that would be unfair to that person. That's one thing that I've learned, and even in my career. Sometimes you're faced with having to make decisions for that particular place, at that particular time, for those particular people. And maybe at that time that was best, for the community. And so I'm not going to second guess, their decision making, because that was then, this is now. And it's always easy to play Monday morning quarterback.
Right. So is that Prop 1, for example,
Right.
What was your position on that?
I'll be flat out, I was against it. I really think that there should be other funding sources or other ways that our city could look at, or our community, for that matter, our region could look at to fund it. And I didn't think that by raising or creating another taxing district was going to be the solution.
Okay. And even though other cities, or not other cities, but basically everywhere else with the medical school has a healthcare district, do you think it just wasn't explained well, or it just wasn't thought out in the best way, or?
I think in terms of the principles behind it, I think the proposition had very salient principles. What I disagreed was the funding mechanism. I think all those principles are good. They're good, positive for our community, but it's really the funding mechanism that I personally disagreed in how that was going to come about.
Okay. And the city's the city tried to stay out of it. They didn't totally. I think people have certain, I don't know. They didn't want it. It helps them with the $2 million,
Sure.
So
at some point, someone's going to have to pay for
Right.
it. And someone's going to have to pay for it, whether maybe inevitably down the line, Prop 1 comes around again, and there is a creation of a taxing district, or maybe there's another solution. As I understand it, this medical school is funded through the University of Texas system, which has a permanent university fund. So if other schools are receiving funding from that source, I don't see why our local medical school at UTRGV would not receive the same
Right.
amount.
So I don't know if you I think you did mention it earlier, but your family has a long-time restaurant in
Yes.
in District 2, Zamora's,
Yes,
a
that's,
Mexican
por eso
restaurant.
estamos como estamos.
So it's a small business, obviously.
Yes, it is.
It's family run. You handle the legalities? What is your involvement with
My role is actually very limited in the sense I handle all the legal issues and also handle some consumer complaints, whether it be a lease contract, a vendor contract. I'll review it, I'll revise it. There's improvements to the parking lot, I'll review it. Sometimes I'll negotiate the contracts. The position of city commissioner, to me, half of the job, if not more than half, is simply public relations. And in what I do now, it is public relations. So I'm basically the face of the restaurant when there is an issue, that there's a concern or complaint, to go forward and reach out to the customer. I've actually reached out to 2 or 3 customers in the last 2 months, and I sent them, a text or an email or by phone, and they shy away. I'm not trying to go after them and get upset. Like I said, I'm a collaborator. I want to be able to meet the person that they're complaining. Let's sit down, be civil about it, and discuss what the issue is, and maybe there's a way we can resolve it, ameliorate it, or make improvements. You know, again, I'm not perfect. My parents aren't perfect. My brothers aren't perfect. But we do have a lot of time invested in our restaurant, and certainly we want to keep our clientele happy.
Does the city do a good job, you think, communicating with your small business, or?
Well, in the 9 years that we've had the restaurant as Zamora's, we've had very good communication with the health department. You know, whether it be through an inspection, things that can be improved. The personnel at the health department are just outstanding in terms of the day-to-day, making sure our business is in compliance with health and safety codes of our city. In terms of marketing our business, we have not been approached by the chamber or the city of McAllen. We had been approached and have been approached by the RGV Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which we ultimately did become members. And so that's one of the ways we're kind of trying to promote our business. But to be perfectly honest, not that we would lie to you, Mitchell, you know, the name Zamora's seems to carry some weight there in North McAllen, and we've been very blessed that we've had as many customers come by. And that's the other thing, is that when I do introduce myself, they either recognize me by face or the name, and they always ask inevitably if I'm part of the same family that owns the restaurants, which of course I say yes. And it's amazing because once they know that, I don't know maybe what prior experience they've had with the restaurant, but whatever wall that may have been there, it drops. You know, you see the eyes lighten up, you see the smile turn on. It's good to see. It's positive. That means that the image, the name of someone is being projected well, and people are satisfied with the customer service. Of course, we have complaints, and they do come inevitably. We're not perfect, but it is good to see that we have a good, proud family name.
Right. Alrighty, I have more, but I think we're out of time.
You know what the problem was, right?
What?
I'm a lawyer. I have these long answers.
You talk, and now you're trying to be a politician, so it's not a good combo. The election is May 6th. Early voting starts next week. This is JJ Zamora. Thanks, JJ.
Mitchell, thank you very much for your time, and to the monitor. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, we're back. I'm Mitchell Furman. I'm with the Monitor. We have current District 2 Commissioner Trey Pebley. Like I mentioned, District 2 is the northwestern part of McAllen. You're finishing up your first term as commissioner. Your first election, you didn't have an opponent, so it was you didn't have to do much. You've put in plenty of money and time and resources into this election. Is it easier, harder, about what you expected campaigning?
It's about what I expected, Mitchell. When I ran 4 years ago, I had visited with some other elected officials and got a feel for what to expect, and last time around, Commissioner Bonetta at the time endorsed me, and then nobody else decided to run. So that was very nice. It was very easy. This time around, though, I've been getting out, been visiting with people, been hearing what issues are, and I've been doing that really throughout my term. In 4 years, I've had a couple of community meetings and such, get the pulse of what the folks in the district are thinking. And so really it's just kind of been building on what I've already been doing over the past, 3.5, almost 4 years now. Yeah,
and in those 4 years, what do you think you've done well for District 2?
It's really just kind of the meat and potatoes things. You were at my last town hall meeting. The issues that came up were sidewalks, yard debris pickup, garbage pickup, things of that nature. And so, we had all these presentations about the new baseball park and the new performing arts center and all of this, and which was good information to be able to communicate to the citizens. But really, the things they were most interested in, we got to the end of the conversation, and just the one-on-one was, the basic meat and potatoes. And so that's why I've just been focusing on that more lately.
Yeah, and that was my first question. That town hall at Lark Community Center, those streets, safety,
yes,
that kind of stuff. How would you assess where are those things at in District 2?
Well, safety, first of all, let me address that from a citywide perspective. The statistics come out on an annual basis that are reported to the FBI, and McAllen is consistently ranked among one of the safest, if not the safest city in Texas and along the border, and really throughout the state. So I got to give 100% credit to Chief Victor Rodriguez and the police officers, the men and women in the force. They do an excellent job keeping all of the city safe. And so along those lines, I would say that District 2, is safe as well. Obviously, you're going to have incidents in different parts of the city, but by and large, District 2 is very, very safe. On some of the issues, that came up in those meetings, I've been proud to say that a lot of the issues that have been brought forward, I've been able to address or get them addressed rather quickly. One of the issues that was brought forward was there at Trenton and 29th Street. There's been a detention area that the city's used for stormwater detention. It was really kind of an eyesore and wasn't kept up well by the city. And so visited with staff, visited with a couple of the neighbors there in the neighborhood, and we came up with an idea to turn that detention area into a park. And so it's called Triangle Park. We've been able to make some of the improvements. It wasn't initially in our budget, so got with staff, worked on the budgets, worked on the timing, and so we've broken it up into 2 phases. The first phase is complete. The second phase should be coming online here probably in 60 to 90 days. We're just waiting on the funding to drop in and move forward. There's one thing too that I've been real proud of is there was a lady who came up to me after that meeting, and she was explaining to me about her son is blind, and he's a teenager going to high school, and he has a counselor that comes over to their house in the afternoons, and she is helping him to learn how to live with that disability going forward as he gets older and be able to move out of the house. And one of the things that they were having issues with was where their house was located. They were close to a bus stop, but there wasn't a sidewalk that connected their house to the bus stop. So they would have to they'd have to walk down a city street to be able to get to this bus stop, which is, obviously unsafe. And so, after visiting with her, went and got with the assistant city manager, got with the city engineer, got with Public Works and manager, and got our heads together and figured out, okay, how can we go about getting a sidewalk in this neighborhood so that this young man can learn and to better himself and to not have to worry about being hit by a vehicle. And so we've got a plan together. There was a citywide sidewalk project that went out for bid a couple weeks ago. That particular sidewalk was in that package. And so, I've been in contact with the lady, told her what was happening. Very, very appreciative. Yeah. And, that's one of those things that really makes me feel good and really shows to me that, I'm making a difference. And it's not some, big mega corporation or something like that. Yeah. It's just a lady who's trying to do the best for her children, and I was able to have a small part in it.
Right.
And so that's what it kind of boils down to.
Yeah. And regarding, sidewalks and those kind of things, so capital improvement budgeting, which is kind of complicated to define, but it involves, money for those kind of things, streets and sidewalks. And but the budgeting for capital improvements has significantly decreased over the years. In 2014, the city spent $7.3 million, and 5.1 million in 2015, 2.7 million last year, and I know it's less this year. Do you see a problem with that, or not really?
No, I think it's something that we definitely need to be addressing. I mean, as the city grows, you're always going to have maintenance on your existing facilities that are going to go on, and so if you defer that maintenance, if you don't pay for it and keep it up, you're going to end up with a lot bigger problems down the road, and so no, it is something that we need to try and address. For years and years, we were getting, I think it was approximately $10 million a year from oil and gas royalties, and basically all of that $10 million was going into capital improvement projects. And due to the drop in oil prices and due to the drop or the lessening of oil and gas extraction within the units of that the city was participating in, we've seen that revenue drop. And so, we're going to have to come up with some new ways to bring in that revenue. A lot of cities turn to bonding issues to pay for certain things. The city of McAllen, we did that a few years ago. We did the 3 bonds that stood on their own, and one of those 3 bonds was for street improvements, transportation improvements. There's also been talk of possibly looking at a drainage bond to pay for some of the drainage issues that we have within the city. That's been addressed at a retreat we had, and then also at a workshop. So no, we're going to have to come up with some ways to get that budget up and take care of the facilities that we have on hand and be ready for future growth.
Right. Well, so you've been the commissioner. Is that something you've pushed for, or is that,
Yes. Yes. No. I mean, that's something that You know, I personally believe, you know, it's kind of like your car. You know, it may cost you $30 to change the oil or $50, and you don't like paying it to change the oil, but if you don't, you know, you could be replacing the engine. And the city of McAllen, we don't need to be replacing the engine. We need to be doing the everyday maintenance and repaving the roads on a timely basis. And that's one thing too, you know, the city of McAllen over the years has done a really good job keeping the roads up. And there'll be people that say, well, I really know when I came into the city of McAllen because the roads got smooth or there weren't potholes. And so that's something we're proud of, and that's something that sets us apart. And you know, it sounds very simple, but it's true. And we need to keep that high level of standard up as best we can.
You know, well, you also own a paving company, I guess, right? So I guess you know.
I don't own a paving company. I work for a paving company.
You work for a paving company.
Yes, I work for a paving company. Yeah, and on that note, everything that I do as a city commissioner, if the company that I work for, which is Foremost Paving Inc., if they bid on a project, whether they're low or they're not, I recuse myself. And whether we're a low bidder or not, there's state law in effect, and I follow that state law, and I do everything. And sometimes I go above and beyond what I need to do just for appearance sakes. And so, you know, I have a very good last name, and I'm very thankful for my parents and my grandparents for giving me the last name that I have, and the number of folks that know us in the community. And so I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that credibility and all of their hard work and their effort over the years.
Do you recuse yourself? You know, when there's a vote, obviously you've recused yourself. Are you involved in the discussions, you know, in executive session or anything like that, if your company's involved or
No. I can think of maybe one time when I was involved in an executive session discussion, and I removed myself physically from the executive session. I physically left the room, and while the discussion took place, came back in, and I didn't know what the decision was until we came back out at the end of the meeting, and the decision was rendered. So that's the only time. There's been one time, I believe, in executive session. All the other times, you know, I state there publicly, and even on the executive session, it was stated that I had recused myself.
Right.
So no, I have a very, very bright line. It's very, very easy to tell when I have any type of conflict, and so I remove myself completely from that from that issue.
Your opponent has mentioned that as you know, you've had to recuse yourself plenty. It's probably pushing 40 times. You most recently recused yourself last
Yes.
week. Do you feel like that's created a disconnect maybe between you and the community?
No, not at all. Because I mean, quite honestly, the way it happens is, you know, the city will solicit bids for a construction project. You know, and let me back up. The companies that I've been working with have been doing the business with the city of McAllen for over 40 years. So they were doing business long before I showed up and even had an inkling of participating with the city, and so the city will put out a bid or a solicitation for bids. The various contractors will then submit bids on the contract, and the city will open the bids, comes before the commission, and it'll show the company's name, it'll show all of the prices that they bid for the various items of work, and then a grand total. And it'll show whether they were a low bidder or not, or where they ranked amongst pricing throughout the project. So at that point in time, it doesn't matter where the company I'm with stood in that bidding process, whether we were first or 10th, and we've been in both places over the years.
Right.
I just recuse myself and go from there.
Do you think do a decent job of, or a good job of connecting with District 2, or do you think you could do a better job?
You know, I think I do a good job, but I think in everything we do, we could always do a better job. You know, I'm not going to say I'm perfect and I've done everything right. And that's one of the benefits of the campaign, quite honestly, is you get out there and you visit with people and you hear what their concerns are. You hear what their issues are. You know, and I'll be very happy to say that in my visits with the folks, as I've been walking around the neighborhoods and knocking on doors and ringing doorbells, there really haven't been that many big issues. A lot of them that have come up, and I say a lot, 2 or 3 that have come up, I've been able to get addressed by sending one assistant city manager a question, or you know, reaching out to the Public Works and asking a question, and then being able to circle back with that citizen and let them know what's happened, why things are the way they are, and what's being done to correct it. So, you know, 9 times out of 10, the small things that do come up, you're able to get it addressed very, very quickly and very easily.
You mentioned you're meeting with people. The campaign's kind of a benefit of that.
Oh yes, definitely.
Do you think that shouldn't necessarily be an every 4 years thing, that you should maybe do that all the time, or is that?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, you need to be reaching out to your constituents and hearing what's going on, and that's why I've been doing the town hall meetings, to kind of give folks a small state of the city and state of the district address, and then hear what their concerns are and what issues we need to be working on. So yeah, that's why I've been doing that, because I personally don't think you're going to be able to physically, as a commissioner, on a weekly, monthly basis, be able to walk to every single house and do everything you need to do. So you have to try and prioritize that, bring folks together. And quite honestly, when you bring people in from different parts of the district, it helps. People end up, visiting. There's a sense of community, and people come together, and they're getting to hear a common message. And so I think that's real beneficial.
Right. You mentioned you've heard a few things that people have questions about or concerns. What were those?
And I chuckle because this one was kind of small, but it was very important to the lady who I was visiting with, and a number of years back, they had added on to their concrete driveway, put a couple feet of concrete onto the side of it. Well, whenever the person they hired to do that work got down towards to the curb, they left a hump in where the curb used to be.
Right.
So they kind of left the curb in place, and the lady said, well, the person who did this work said I couldn't remove it because of the city wouldn't let me. Well, I told her, I don't think that's correct, but let me find out and I'll get back with you. Sure enough, that they could have removed it without a problem.
Right.
But to her, it was a big issue and a very valid concern. There was a call from another lady who was talking about trying to have a smaller regional park near her neighborhood, which those are always very, very helpful, and we try to put those in. Developers, as they're developing new subdivisions, that's one of the things they can do. They either put up parkland or they pay a fee for the development, so to help fund more parks. So those are one issue. And another issue was how to deal with bulk trash, basically. Larger items, say like a sofa or a mattress, things of that nature. And that had already been talked about at one of our previous workshops. And at the end of this month, I can't remember the exact date, but we're going to be having the citywide. Actually, it's going to start here at the Monitor offices, so we appreciate y'all partnering with the city. But it's going to be a day for everybody to try and get rid of all that bulk trash and get it taken care of, and kind of no questions asked. So that's something that's real beneficial, because we have a private business partnering with the city of McAllen, helping to solve issues out in the community. So
Right.
that's what it's all about, in my opinion.
And those concerns that people have, or the few that you've heard while campaigning, do you think the city could do a better job at communicating with people? Do you think they do an okay job or a lousy job, or where would you assess that?
You know, I think we do an okay job. I think, as I said earlier, we can always do a better job. But you know, I think the 311 app and the 311 phone line that we have is a big help. I think you know, we probably do a better job of trying to push that out there. You know, because on that app, you download that app, and if you want to talk to me, there's a list of all the city commissioners and the mayor, picture of me. You tap on that, it's got my email address and a phone number. So you can either tap on the phone, it'll call me. Don't do it now because we're live. Or you can tap on the little envelope and be able to send me an email right then and there. You can do that to anybody. So any one of the commissioners or the mayor. Or you can report, you know, issues that you see, a broken sprinkler head along a park trail, say graffiti, say a fallen tree branch on a park trail, or say park equipment that's broken or been vandalized. You know, you can report all that, goes right in. You'll get a response back yourself to show you that it has been received by the city, and you'll get ongoing status updates until it's corrected, and you can see how many other people have reported that same issue as well. So you know, I think we're embracing technology. We're trying to use it to maximize our forces, maximize the number of eyes that are out there looking at things, and being able to communicate back to us so we can fix things in a timely manner before they get out of hand. But I think we just need to keep working on it. That has been. The 311 app has been in existence, I believe, about two and a half years, maybe.
You mentioned safety and how the city's, you know, pretty safe, and I think by and large, I think a good amount of people probably believe it's safe. But violent crimes are up in the last year, and last year there was one more murder, 24 more rapes, 14 more robberies, 24 more aggravated assaults. How do you fix that?
You know, that's a good question. You know, one of the things that we had going for the city is our crime numbers have been so low over the years that any time you would have one more or two more of a particular crime in that following year, you would see a huge jump percentage-wise. So percentage-wise, you are seeing increases. You know, and some of the murders that you talked about and the violent crimes. You know, unfortunately, some of that is just they're bad people or sick people living within the city of McAllen. You know, and I don't know of a good way to handle that. You know, I can think of one event that took place a few months ago, which is very, very sad. A young girl lost her life.
McAllen.
Yes, and you know, really touched the community at large. Yeah, I don't have an answer.
Yeah,
for that,
well,
Mitchell.
police, and so 50% of the budget goes to police and fire.
Yes.
So I mean, they basically work for you guys.
Yes.
Is more jobs in those areas? Is that something you guys are looking at, or not necessarily?
No, you know, we look at it. We look at it real hard. I mean, at budget time, that is something we look at really, really hard. We look at the number of officers and the number of police officers per thousand of population. You know, we keep that purposely low. I mean, we want to have a high number of officers to citizenry. That ratio is probably the best in the valley and across the state as well. You know, we're always actively going out and looking for new cadets. We recently had some new cadets graduate the academy. They're coming online as full-blown police officers. And so the thing we're looking at is, okay, what is the attrition rate? You know, how many people, how many officers or firefighters are we losing on an annual basis, and how many are we able to fill into the academies? And the other thing is too is we have very high standards when it comes to getting into the academy, and so people that get into the academy for the city of McAllen probably aren't going to get into the academies in other cities down here, and we do that on purpose because we want, you know, good, high quality police officers and firefighters, and that's what we have. And
Yeah.
And we lost a number of officers 2 years ago whenever the DPS came in and hired a bunch of police officers when they were starting to do their surge down here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's hard to keep up with their pay rates and
Right.
such, but we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. There's a lot of conversation in Austin right now about the medical school, UTRGV Medical School.
Yes.
You know, you know, if the medical school's, the funding for the medical
Right.
school, if it's funded properly at the beginning, it could, you know, go that one way, and if it's not, it could go another way. McAllen, you know, a lot of local communities pledged, you know, McAllen said it would pay up to $2 million a year.
Right.
And it's made one payment in 2014
Right.
for $2 million. It hasn't paid since. Why not?
Quite honestly, Mitchell, we just haven't had the revenues to be able to handle that. You know, when we went into that agreement back in, I guess it was 2013, you know, we had good sales tax revenues. Our budgets looked good. Things were moving along. There were also plans for certain facilities to be in here in McAllen, and you know, we've just since 2014, unfortunately, you know, we've had the peso devaluation, we've had continued violence in Mexico, and now there's been some issues at the federal and state level that have decreased the number of Mexican shoppers that we normally see to keep our sales tax dollars up. And so, you know, the commission as a whole has made a decision that you know, we need to take care of the citizens of McAllen first. That's what our role and responsibility is, and we're going to do everything we can to take care of UTRGV, the medical school, but you know, we got to take care of our citizens first. I know Mayor Darling, you know, he's been reaching out to cities in Cameron County and in Cameron County themselves, and also reaching out to Hidalgo County to try and get them to step forward and take more of a regional approach to that, because you know, a lot of those dollars are being funded by the county, and so we're trying to kind of create a bigger net to try and get the dollars that were committed, and but then decrease the burden on each of the individual cities. So, you know, we had that memorandum,
Yeah.
and you know, the best thing in the world was we'd be able to write a check for $2 million every year, and we have extra money in the bank and plenty of money for CIP funds.
Yeah.
But we just haven't been able to do that.
So I know city staff budgeted $1 million this year, right, to give them, and the commission hasn't voted on it. Is that going to happen?
Can't tell you if it's going to happen or not. We'll see. We'll see what comes about.
Okay.
Well, and let me also tell you this: we don't want to just say $1 million if nobody else is going to give any money. If that $1 million isn't going to move the needle on how well a medical school we're going to have, you know, that's what we want to make sure, is that whenever we give funds for something, that we're getting the best bang for our buck. And so we want to make sure that we're being able to tie that $1 million or whatever that amount may be or may not be to make sure that we're getting the best we can for the city of McAllen and its citizens.
What was your position on Prop 1, the creation of a healthcare district?
I was opposed to it.
You're opposed?
Yes.
Why?
I was opposed to it because of the way the funding was set up. I was opposed to it because once the law went into effect, you could, the healthcare district could go up to a rather large tax rate without having to come back to the voters, and so I don't think that's right. I think that the overall goal of the healthcare district, was good. But I think if you're going to raise taxes in one area to pay for indigent health care, you need to have offsetting dollars be pledged at the county level. So if you're going to if the healthcare district is going to raise 8 cents per thousand on your residents, the county needs to be pulling back that same amount so you're not getting taxed twice. And unfortunately, that wasn't the way that was structured. And so I was opposed to it because, in effect, it was almost double taxation, in my opinion.
That's interesting. I want to talk more on that, but we don't have enough time. So the city currently has no full-time position in Austin or Washington, right? Like no government affairs person based either places, or Mexico City for that matter. But cities often will contract out like lobbyists and those kind of things during legislatures. And do you think that it's necessary to have someone in Austin full time in Austin or Washington or Mexico?
I don't think that we need to have a full-time city employee in Austin or Mexico or in D.C. I think that if we were to employ lobbyists, that would probably be a good first step. We do employ lobbyists at the state level. McGuire Woods is our lobbyist there,
right.
And I got to spend quite a bit of time with some of their representatives. And when we went up for RGV Day a few months back, they set up a number of really good meetings with officials from the governor's office, and then also various state reps and senators, and not our local state reps and senators, but state reps and senators from outside of the Rio Grande Valley, so that we could better explain to them what it's like to live in McAllen, what it's like to live in the Rio Grande Valley, what are our issues, what are our challenges, and help and allow us to offer them possible solutions to bring forward. So that was very, very helpful. And so I think if we were to take that same concept and replicate it in Washington, D.C., and then in Mexico as well, I think that would probably be money well spent. We've talked about it some, but we just haven't done it at both federal levels yet.
Because people talk about surrounding cities maybe growing, like and McAllen isn't as much, whether that's true or not. But so, for example, FAR has a liaison in Mexico through their bridge, and they are basically just running around meeting with people, and it pays off. I mean, their bridge is obviously a big deal for the city and the region. Mission has a strong presence in Austin. Do does it seem like McAllen's lagging behind in those respects, or not really?
I don't think so. I mean, quite honestly, and I'll tell you, through my business, I have, in some state associations that I belong to on a professional side, I've gotten to know a number of state legislators and federal legislators, and there's something that happens in McAllen, or there's an issue, I can pick up the phone or send a text to one of these folks that I've gotten to know over the years and let them know, hey, this is happening and this is a real issue for us. Can you please look at this or look at that? Give me your insights and let me know where you think we need to go. So
Right.
we have a number of folks down here in McAllen that are connected with Washington and with Austin and with Mexico City, and I think by trying to bring those folks in, along with working with some local lobbying firms, I think we could go a long ways and help solidify our positions.
Okay. Well, we run out of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
The election, this is Trey Pebley, District 2 incumbent. The election is May 6th. Early voting starts next week. All the voting information is on the city's website, McAllen.net, I think it is. And
Yes.
thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Mitchell. Appreciate the time today.
Sure thing.
Thank you all.